on Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
You're listening to The Jan Price Show, and my guest today is Monika Henreid, and she is a documentary filmmaker and the daughter of the famous actor Paul Henreid. And I'm so happy to have you back on the show. We had so much to talk about last week. We decided to do a second show with Monika. So Monika, when we talked last week, we were just talking about he had just done Joan of Paris with Michelle Morgan. Tell me a little bit, how was the success of that movie?
Well, I think it did well. It did well. Shall I say the best news is that it is a film that Bette Davis happened to see. And when Warner Brothers was actually struggling to find someone to play opposite her in Now Voyager, she said, well, why don't you go look at this young guy who just did Joan of Paris? So they brought him over to Warner Brothers and caked him with makeup and slicked down his hair and put him in a ridiculous jacket with big shoulder pads and so on and so forth. And he did the screen test, and luckily Betty saw it and said, who's that? And they said, well, that's the guy you wanted us to bring over from RKO. And she said, no, that's not him at all, not even. But if you're telling me it's that same human being, well, then you have to test him again. You have to take off the makeup, have him wash his hair, get him out of the stupid clothes. So that was it. I mean, she was really the one who was behind. She was the force behind getting him the job at Warner Brothers, and ultimately the contract and working opposite her in Now Voyager.
And it's one of my favorite movies. I love Now Voyager. I just watched it again last week, and I just loved it. All right, so let's talk about the famous scene lighting the two cigarettes. There's a story behind that, I'm sure.
Oh, do they light two cigarettes? I don't remember.
Umpteen million times. I forgot how many times I should have counted it.
I just want you to know, Jan, that this is not the most original question I have ever been asked.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Sorry.
However, I will answer it again.
It's a different audience.
My mother and my father smoked cigarettes. And when they took road trips, which they loved to do, because I believe I mentioned my mother had her own car in Austria, and they loved just leaving the city and going to Salzburg or Innsbruck for a long weekend or whatever have you. Whenever they drove, because it was a standard shift, whoever was actually physically driving the car couldn't light the cigarette. So whoever was in the navigator seat would take out two cigarettes, light them both, and pass it over to the driver. If my mother was driving, my father would do it. If my father was driving, my mother would do it. It was just habit. Apparently, something like this had appeared in other films. People have mentioned that to me. And it is actually in the book, the Prouty book, Now Voyager, that there is a sequence about exchanging cigarettes. But when it was put into the script and it was then attempted, it reads fine. But when you actually tried to do the way it was written in the script, it became all arms and cigarettes back and forth, and it was awkward and uncomfortable, and my father and Betty just couldn't resolve how to get it done. So at the end of that day, my father, when he got home, was exhausted and grumpy, and this is, stories being told me because I wasn't born yet, but this was something that annoyed him, let's put it that way. So after describing his unhappy day to my mother, she simply said, why don't you just do what we do? And the next morning, when he arrived on the set, he showed Betty the suggestion of this old habit that he and my mother had shared for years. She loved it. They went to Irving Rapper, who was the director, showed it to him. He hated it. Betty one-upmanshiped him and called Hal Wallace, who was the producer on the film. Hal Wallace loved it. It worked. It was easy. It was comfortable. And to the point where Hal Wallace liked it so much, he actually had that piece of business written into the script more often. It was actually only there once, and it now ends up being 4 or 5 times, I think.
Well, I read when doing some research for this that Irving Rapper wanted it, almost cut it out of the film.
Oh, yeah. I would say the relationship between my father, Betty, and Irving Rapper was not cool. There was not a lot of I don't know if respect is the right word. It was personality differences, and Betty, who was a gang of her own, had my father to support her in her thoughts and beliefs as to how certain scenes should be played. Betty also supported my father, and again, as I said, he had great confidence and would say, no, this character would approach it this way, or this is more natural for him to do. She supported him, so Irving Rapper kind of got, I won't say pushed aside, but he was sort of third man on the totem pole. Which is not usually a comfortable place for a director. The director likes to be, top of the totem pole.
Right. But when you have the producer who's, obviously oversees everything behind the two stars, then that makes it, even more that formidable. And Betty Davis was a force of her own, no question about it. Pretty much
was great.
Yeah,
I loved her. I just loved her.
Did you have a chance to meet her through the years?
She was like a second mother.
Oh my gosh, tell me about that. I love her.
Knew her or got to know her very well my parents and Betty became very, very good friends because of Now Voyager, and their friendship lasted until she passed away, which was 48 years, 46 years or something like that. They were good friends. When she was on the West Coast, she would come to our house very often, lunches, dinners, talks well into the evening. We would go to her home. Oh, well, my parents being European didn't have tremendous, Thanksgiving didn't have tremendous significance for them. And the idea of my father eating a turkey was just so out of the question that I don't think we ever even had a turkey in our house ever for any reason. But Betty, being the all-American American, that New Englander with all that spirit, we would go to her house for Thanksgiving dinner. And it would be the whole family and everybody else's families. It was usually, probably 20 adults and almost as many children. And it would be a true Thanksgiving meal. I mean, that's how I learned about Thanksgiving.
Wow. What was she like?
She was great. She was absolutely great. Absolutely. Like you say, she was a force of her own. She was phenomenal. If she was your friend, that's about the only friend you needed. I mean, she was just amazing. An amazing, amazing woman. Confident and yet gentle and sweet and there are no words. I just loved her to pieces.
Well, to me, she's one of the greatest actresses that ever lived, especially during that era. Yeah. Sorry, say that again.
That too.
Oh, that too. Yes, I know. Yeah. Meryl Streep for this generation, and Betty Davis for that generation, and I know that Betty Davis was an inspiration to Meryl Streep and always has been too, and she has been an inspiration to many actors. And there were so many great actresses from that era. I mean, Barbara Stanwyck, and I mean, just many. Didn't they do another film together? Your father and Betty Davis? Did they do another film?
Yes, as co-stars. As co-stars, they did another film called Deception.
Oh, Deception, that's right.
Yeah, and that didn't work out well for Irving Rapper either, who was their director.
He directed that one too. Okay.
Yeah.
I saw that one too when I was homesick in bed, so I did see it. Yeah, it wasn't as good.
Yeah, but the film belongs. I mean, Betty and my father aside, they're wonderful together, and it's always fun watching them together.
Yes.
But that film belongs to Claude Rains.
Yes.
Absolutely belongs to Claude Rains.
Yeah.
He chose the scenery in that like no one else's business. I mean, and the three of them together, in the sequences that the three of them are together, you can see it. It's in the eyes, the way they look at each other, the way well, again, that's acting. That's what it's called.
Right.
And luckily, again, Irving Rapper backed off as necessary and just let these three professionals go at each other. So, for instance, the sequence in the restaurant is just priceless. And it's not just that Claude Rains is having more fun than any actor should ever have, but watching how my father and Betty are watching him and watching each other and back and forth. I mean, it's just priceless. He is just brilliant in that film. Superb actor in the first place, but just for me in Deception, he owns it. That's his.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you could just see he was relishing his role, and it brought the three of them back together again too.
It did.
You know,
Yes.
and then we move on to the iconic role of Victor Laszlo in Casablanca, which I again watched again for the umpteenth time. Again with Claude Rains and your father. Talk a little bit about that. How did he get that role, and how did he feel about that role?
How did he get that role? He was there. He was under contract at Warner Brothers. He was across the alley shooting Now Voyager. I mean, that's it.
That was it?
There. Yeah, he was there. And actually, he turned it down. He didn't want to do it.
And why? Why did he turn it down, Monika?
Well, because he had now had 2 films under his belt where he was the leading man opposite the leading lady. And it was only their 2 names above the title. And placement like that is really very important and very significant. Mm-hmm. And when he originally read what was given him as Victor Laszlo, it was a smaller part. It was maybe closer to the way it had been done in the play originally, excuse me, where there's a lot of time spent talking about Victor Laszlo, but you don't get to see Victor Laszlo. You don't get to meet Victor Laszlo. So his agent by then, fortunately, was Lou Wasserman, who also ended up having a pretty good show business career.
Yes, he did. Yes.
And the 2 of them sort of figured out a way to just say, look, if you want Mr. Henreid to be the 3rd actor in this, and you want him to be he's actually the co-star. His character is actually the co-star to Rick and Ilsa. So therefore, his name needs to be above the title. And clearly he has to, walk away with Ilsa in the end. So those 2 things were negotiated to whatever point. My father had a terrible cold. He and Claude Rains both had colds at the end of Now Voyager, and were not feeling well at all. But a contract is a contract. I don't think they held production on Casablanca for Claude Rains, but they did hold my father's scenes closer to the end of the shooting schedule of Casablanca because Bogey had a previous commitment. He had to be finished by a certain day. So it was a typical Hollywood. And for anybody working on the film, it was a job. Mm-hmm. Nobody suspected that it would reach the ranks of fame and popularity that it has. It was a job. They were doing their jobs. They were showing up, learning their lines, showing up, hitting their marks, and doing the best they could. And that was another one of those sets where there was something new every day, blue pages every day, things being rewritten. My father and Bogey and Claude Rains and a few other actors getting very disgruntled with Michael Curtiz and but what do we have as a result? We have a masterpiece.
Yeah, it's a masterpiece. It's always listed as one of the best movies ever made. So,
exactly.
It's always on the top of the list. If you are just tuning in and you are listening to the Jan Price Show all about movies, and my guest today is the lovely Monika Henreid, and she is a filmmaker and the daughter of famous film actor Paul Henreid, and we are just having such a good time talking about her father's career. So how was it for your father after? I mean, was it very as successful when it came out as it over the years? Literally when we watch the movie, we know all the lines, we can say them all out loud. Was that the reaction to people had when that movie came out? Do you know?
Well, again, stories having been told around the dinner table, I think it was popular. I don't think it was phenomenal. I don't think it was what you call now a blockbuster by any means. But it did well at the box office. The timing of the release was perfection because it hit the headlines just when the Casablanca conference was, all over the newspaper. And prior to that, in November, the Operation Torch was all over the newspaper, which also was relative to Morocco and Casablanca. So Warner Brothers did a good marketing thing with that, taking advantage of that. So I think it was very well received. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was popular. It actually got popular during the time of when television came about, and suddenly there was the demand for 24-hour television programming, and the stations themselves couldn't possibly afford to make enough product to cover 24 hours, and someone came up with the idea, all these old studios have all these old movies, I bet we can get them cheap. And they did. And so suddenly all of the middle of America that didn't get to see all of these films could watch them any time of the day or night. And a lot of the shows ran the films, 5 or 7 nights in a row. So if you missed it on Monday, you could see it on Tuesday or Thursday or Friday or Saturday, or you wanted to see it again, you could see it as many times as you wanted within a week, because it would play for an entire week on these television channels across the country.
Wow, amazing. How do you think, or why do you think it developed this legendary status that it has? And it keeps growing. It seems like every year it keeps growing. The mythology around Casablanca.
Yeah. Well, I know. This is one of those questions I've been asked a lot, and for me, the answer is integrity. It's the integrity of the characters. Everybody in the film does the right thing. They all behave properly. They all... It would be wrong. Well, first of all, the censors would never allow a married woman to stay behind with her lover and put her husband on an airplane and say goodbye. That would never happen in 1942.
Yeah.
But there's something about there are all sorts of layers of love. There's all sorts of different kinds of love. And at this particular time, in this particular film, love of principle, love of not companionship, I don't mean it in that way, but it was bigger than romantic love. And even Bogey's character, even Rick, goes off and implies that he's now, back, he's joining the fight, he's going to help the good guys win. He's going to go off with Louis, and they're going to figure out how to knock down the Nazis. Everybody, the principal characters that you care about, the people, you want them as your friends. You want Rick and Ilsa and Victor to be your friends, and Louis. You want to hang out with these guys.
Right.
And that has a tremendous influence on an audience. That's why people see this film over and over and over again, because it's like sitting down with your old friends. What is my old friend going to do? Well, we know what he's going to do. So what is he going to say? Well, we know what he's going to do. It doesn't matter. It's like it's comfortable. We love these guys.
Well, it's our comfort food. Maybe we need that more than ever in everything that's going on in the world today, and so many people who don't have integrity. It's like a foreign word anymore.
Absolutely.
Constantly we read about something somebody else has done that's totally out of integrity, and it's such an important, for me, it's just one of those important qualities to have in any of my friends, is that they have integrity. And so maybe that's why we resonate so much. You're right about this movie. You're correct when you say that. And I hadn't thought about it quite like that, but you're right. Yeah. It is definitely that way. So what happened after Casablanca to your father's career? Because here he had 2 amazing, classic movies back to back that he's so well known for. What happened after that, Monika?
Well, he was at Warner Brothers. He still had, I think, a little bit of a contract with RKO. It was sort of a dual thing. He was originally contracted to RKO, then he went to Warner's. He got all of these films at Warner's, and he continued making them. However, he was right. It should have gone, Betty Davis, or Betty Davis, Barbara Stanwyck, Ginger Rogers. He should have stayed up there with all of the A ladies, just one-on-one. And his career kind of started, and I don't mean to say anything negative about any of the actresses he ever worked with. He worked with great actresses. He worked with Ida Lupino. He worked with Olivia de Havilland. He worked with Hedy Lamarr. So he stayed there, but the films themselves weren't quite the same fabulous quality. I mean, and again, I don't mean to say anything negative. It's just the way of the world, the way it was then. He wasn't really relegated to B pictures. I don't mean it that way, but it changed. Their perception of him changed, because he was no longer the number 1 leading man. He was the second guy to Bogey. And it changed the Hollywood perception of him.
Oh, that's too bad.
Switched his career. Well, again, good news, bad news. If he had continued doing what I'm suggesting didn't happen, and he could have gotten caught up in just playing the suave, romantic, charming leading man.
Right.
He was a trained actor. He never looked at himself as being just a good-looking leading man. He had learned fencing. He had learned body movement. He had learned singing. He had learned makeup. He had learned stage movement. He'd learned set design. He had gone to school to learn how to become an actor. So he wanted to use all of these skills he had. He didn't want to get pigeonholed. He didn't want to become a cliche, so to speak. So because of this and a few other things that happened also in his career later on, he went off. He came up with an idea and went over to RKO and said, look, I'm done with these kind of leading men. I really want to do something different. I want to be this. He actually took the idea to Jack Warner first. And Jack Warner said, yeah, well, look, if I want a swashbuckler, I've already got Errol Flynn. I don't need you. So he took the idea back to RKO, and RKO said, well, if we can develop this into a decent script, let's go for it. Let's try it. And he took it to Herman Mankiewicz, and a bottle of scotch later, there was a deal to write the script for The Spanish Main, which is just a fun, raucous, adventurous, beautifully photographed pirate picture. Sort of a, Robin Hood of the high seas or the Caribbean. It's just a frolic on the ocean with the most gorgeous woman with her flaming red hair, Maureen O'Hara, and a bunch of really gritty and great character actors. And it's fun. There's not too much to be taken seriously there. And Walter Slezak is the bad guy. I mean, oh, please, it's just delicious.
Well, we'll have to look for that one for sure.
And it's in color. It's the first Technicolor film that RKO made, so it got a lot of publicity. I think it was the biggest box office that RKO had that year.
You're kidding me. And
it was huge.
Wow.
And it was huge.
And that was the title of it again was?
The Spanish Main.
The Spanish Main. I think they're actually be running that on Turner Classic Movies this month. I think I saw.
Well, I hope they run it again and again because it is popular and people do enjoy it. You also get my father was very funny. He had a great sense of humor, and you do get to see that a little bit in The Spanish Main. And he was a terrific athlete. He played tennis every day. He swam every day. We would go horseback riding, bicycle riding, climbing, hiking.
Wow. Running on the
beach. I mean, he's a real physical guy. So for him to be able to show off a little bit in The Spanish Main, I think he enjoyed that.
Well, Monika, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. We could talk for hours and hours and hours. So I look forward to having you back on the show at another time. But thank you so much for the insights about your father and his career and your mother.
It's my pleasure, truly. And again, this is exactly why I'm making the documentary about him. Because his story, for as romantic and heroic as it is on film, his life story is the ups and downs, and the romance is much bigger and much more interesting.
I can't wait to see it. Thank you again.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Go to the Jan Price Show on Facebook to learn more about upcoming shows, and while you're there, please like my page, and to listen to the Price Movie Minute movie reviews, and to listen to archived shows that you may have missed, go to thejanpriceshow.com.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
Hi, this is Rich Little. Join me in beautiful Carmel by the Sea the weekend of March the 29th and 30th to celebrate the legendary Doris Day's 97th birthday. Enjoy a 60th anniversary screening of Pillow Talk with film host Ben Mankiewicz and Q&A with Doris's co-stars Jackie Joseph, Peter Marshall, and me, and a special concert by Michael Feinstein. Auctions, raffle, dog adoptions, and more. Proceeds benefit the Doris Day Animal Foundation. Hey, I'll even bring along Doris's leading men like Clark Gable, Jimmy Stewart, or Cary Grant. Visit DorisDayAnimalFoundation.org for tickets and more information.